paddle, 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 paddle.
Hello, welcome back to 340 Paddler, and today we want to talk about racing self-supported, and things happen with something like the 340. Maybe you couldn't find someone who was willing to drive down from Wisconsin. You couldn't find a ground crew there. You couldn't, or maybe you had a ground crew, they had to drop out. And let me remind you, sometimes dealing with ground crews can be tricky enough, but there has to be a way to do things virtually for those who are unable to have a ground crew either throughout the entire race or at all. So what do you do? Well, the first thing that people tend to think of is I need to pack everything I need. I need to carry all the water. I need to carry all the food. And the truth is, you don't need to do any of that. You need to have appropriate nutrition to get you through the race, or at least a plan. We'll get into some of that. You need to have a plan for hydration. But I will be honest with you. If you pull up to a checkpoint and ask for water, more than likely you will receive it. So, let's talk about the virtual ground crew option. Now, a virtual ground crew is nothing more than someone at home or somewhere else who isn't on the river, who knows where you are, roughly, and when you're expected at the next checkpoint, roughly. The whole key to this is so that Scott Mansker and Mansker's minions can contact that virtual ground crew should something happen. Should they be looking for you, this will be the point of contact. This is really the person who needs to know where you are. And it can be as simple as someone with access to your Spot device, like you see here. Now, Spot is the most common. Of course, there are other tracking devices. I strongly recommend, however, using some form of tracking device. You can even rent Spot and others for a week at a time for maybe $25 or so. Well worth it. Why do I say that? Because there are parts of the river where you are not going to have cell phone reception. Your cell phone might not work, and so Find a Friend or some of those different apps aren't necessarily going to be as functional as you would like. And that virtual ground crew has to know where you are. So whether you use some kind of Garmin device or Spot or some kind of other tracking device, there needs to be something there. And yes, it could be some other form of technology for communication. You basically need to be able to communicate with that virtual ground crew. They need to know where you are. They need to be able to get in touch with you, no matter what technology you happen to be comfortable with. And, sending smoke signals and fish messages usually don't work out really well. Does this have a lot to do with virtual ground crew? No, but it's a funny picture, and I like funny pictures. Let me do my thing. I'm making these videos. So, let's talk about strategies. How can you make this work self-supported? We talked about the virtual ground crew, which is the required element. But if you really want to, you could get into an empty boat and just go paddle and see how far you can get without ever restocking. No one's going to stop you up until the point that you possibly pass out from dehydration. So the first option that you have is adoption. Now, adoption is fantastic. There are lots of great paddlers out there who lack ground crews. They don't have the love and affection that they need. They need someone to take them in, love them, care for them. Okay, maybe going a little bit too far, but adoption is basically taking over or helping another paddler. Many of us tell our ground crews to go ahead and help any paddler who needs assistance without doing any material injury to ourselves. So in other words, there's certain supplies that I can't give up because I don't have enough of them, or maybe I just have barely enough, and there are other supplies that I can freely give. My ground crew can give, for example, most of my food and water and that sort of thing. But after about Waverly or so, you'll know who you're running with. And so you could easily have that ground crew kind of be your adoptive ground crew. offer them some money to go pick up whatever it is you need, be it various food items or whatever else you might find yourself desiring. Otherwise, you can just come up to the checkpoint and go, who has this? I have never once in 8 years come to a checkpoint, announced that I needed something, and not had someone say, yeah, I've got that. Just give me a second. It is ridiculous. It is fantastic. It is just part of the 340 culture. And of course, these adopted ground crews might even start cheering for you and encouraging you throughout the race, and that's fantastic. It's always a great thing to have. Now, you also have the option of drop bags. And what this is basically you find someone who's going to be faster than you, and you ask their ground crew to leave a drop bag at the flag for each checkpoint or at a specific point at the ramp. For example, hey, can you leave it on the rocks to the right of the ramp? Even if you've never been to a ramp and you don't know what it looks like, there are probably rocks, there's probably a right side, it works. If it's a checkpoint, there's always a flag. So the most common place is by the flag, and you simply go up and look for your marked drop bag. Not everyone uses it, but it works for some people. Or maybe you have ground crew for part of the race and you can have a friend run out and drop things along the course, and that would be just as useful. Really, no one's going to disturb it more than likely, and it's a great strategy to keep your boat light because, of course, you don't have to carry that material the entire race. You're only picking up what you need as you need it. So in that sense, you very much have a ground crew, at least for the supplies. Now, you can also use the checkpoints for food and resupply. Many of the checkpoints and even some paddle stops will have food, etc. There's Cooper's Landing, but then again, Waverly will have food. Miami will have food. Glasgow will have food. Franklin Island for most of the time will have food, I believe. Then Cooper's, Jeff City, Herman, right on down the line. They almost always have food. So if you carry maybe the equivalent of $5 to $10 per checkpoint, you can just eat at the checkpoints and make sure that you have enough water to get to the next checkpoint, and you can probably do just fine, or at least it cuts down on the amount that you need to carry in the boat with you. At the end of the day, we want to see you get to the end of the race. We want to see the self-supported paddlers doing as well as the supported paddlers. And I will be honest with you, it would probably be fairly difficult to get through the race without making friends, without meeting other people and being adopted if you're a self-supported paddler. So don't worry, it will happen. Give it time, talk to people, let them know what you need. And if you let them know, frequently they will provide. So make sure you have your virtual ground crew. Make sure you have your stuff packed and ready to go. Until next time, this is 340 Paddler, hoping that you keep your paddle in the water.